What's up, everybody? We're live for KNBR on Twitter and YouTube, and we really appreciate it. We're on Twitch as well. It's John Dickinson. It's Greg Silver. It's Just Dubs with JD and Silver here on a Saturday. A happy Saturday morning to you. It's March, and the Warriors are hot. They went again last night in Toronto. They're 3-0 on this road trip. They've won 8 in a row on the road, 13-3 in the last 16. And the Warriors are doing it, and they're doing it with the help of young players. Again, with Moses Moody able to step in for Andrew Wiggins. We don't know when Andrew Wiggins is going to be back. Jonathan Kuminga has reemerged with his high-level scoring prowess on this trip, and the Warriors have needed it to earn consecutive victories in Washington, New York, and Toronto. Big one in Boston tomorrow. I'm sure we'll spend a good chunk of the next 2 hours talking about that. But as we welcome in Greg Silver, the Warriors are keeping this thing rolling here. Lose to the Nuggets, but win the first 3 on the road. They won a couple right out of the gate coming out of the All-Star break before the loss to Denver. And the Warriors are just playing at a really high level right now as they try to get their way out of the 9-10 matchup in the Western Conference play-in race.
It's two things that have caught me off guard. One of them being that we're in March now. Where has the time gone in the last few months? And then two is the Warriors playing hot and being 5 games over 500 now. I didn't think that was a reality we would necessarily see back in early January when last night they beat the Raptors, and you contrast that with the previous game against the Raptors when they had maybe their worst game of the entire season. They've really turned a corner. It's been nice.
Yeah, they've turned the corner, and we appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch as well as the Twitter live stream for KNBR. Going to do this for the next couple of hours here as we do each and every Saturday morning. If we can't be live on KNBR, we are going to be live on YouTube and Twitch and on the Twitter stream as well. So it's a pleasure to be here as people kind of file in on a Saturday morning and discuss all things Warriors basketball and all things NBA as this team continues to play at a really, really high level. One of the questions we were kind of kicking around last night on Dubs OT following the Toronto game, and there was a real good balanced response to it. And it was basically, do the Warriors need a win against a quality opponent to validate this hot streak, to validate the 14-5 since January 24th, 13-3 since January the 30th. But when you look at the teams that they've beaten versus the teams that they've been beaten by, you look at the 5 losses, it's Sacramento, it's the Lakers, a couple of teams at Sacramento they're chasing, the Lakers that the Warriors are right there basically tied for 9th and 10th. The one outlier was the game in Atlanta, but then the other 2, the Clippers, playing as well as anybody for the most part. They've taken a little bit of a step back over the last 2 weeks, and the Nuggets. And so you've got one win against the Suns mixed in there, and maybe I'm missing one that the Warriors should get a little bit more credit for. I don't really count the Knicks because of Randall and Anunoby being out. But you look at where the Warriors are at, and I know they have some quality wins earlier in the year. I know somebody had said, well, JD, they beat the Celtics. Are you talking about the Celtics specifically? They beat the Celtics back in December. Yes, they did. But
like 3 seasons ago.
And that was just a completely different team. The way that they were functioning, the way that they were operating at that point in time, there was no real semblance of a rotation that could be effective with any level of consistency. So this team, now that they've figured it out with Steph and Podziemski and Wiggins and Kuminga and Draymond Green, and now Moody able to fill in for Wiggins. Klay Thompson went back into the starting lineup for Podziemski, who's day-to-day at this point with some knee soreness. Chris Paul coming off the bench, Klay Thompson coming off the bench. Does this team need a win against a quality opponent? Because you could make the case that they're one with Phoenix, and then Sacramento, LA, they're basically 1-4 against what you would deem to be quality Western Conference opponents. over this stretch where they've been 14-5. Now 13-1 basically against everybody else, but the 1-4 isn't nothing. But I know we were kind of kicking around last night. A lot of split on whether they need it to validate what they've done to this point over the last month.
Well, I think this is the perfect time to revisit the question of the night from last night, because it is a literal flip-flop when I go to both social media platforms. For those who need a reminder,
51-49.
No, it's so it was, do the Warriors need to beat a title contender to validate this recent hot streak? Threads has it as 55-45 no to yes, and then Twitter has it the exact opposite, 55 yes, 45 no. So yeah, it was a really even split.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. So if you add up the percentages, obviously some more votes probably on Twitter. The yes would come out on top of the no. And look, there's arguments to be made on both ends of it. I sort of said last night, I feel like if this team just keeps winning and gets out of the 9-10 matchup, hell, gets out of the 7-8 matchup, even if they end up, let's say 7th or 8th, but they keep playing at the level that they're playing, and maybe there's other teams that play at that level as well between now and the end of the regular season, and the Warriors can't quite make up the ground, then I think that sort of stands alone in just showing what this team could be. Like it would be validated basically at that point by, do they make it out of the play-in tournament, number one, and number two, how much of a legitimate threat are they in a given playoff series? Because at this point, and I know things could still change, but at this point, you're looking at, the Warriors would be playing for the 8th seed still, right? They'd be 9-10, have to beat the Lakers. They'd have to beat either Sacramento or Dallas as it stands currently, whoever would lose the 7-8 game that those two teams would be playing. But then you're basically playing Minnesota or OKC right now, although Denver's hot on the heels of Minnesota and OKC. Denver's only a game back of the top spot, and they all of a sudden have won 5 in a row. So you never know. It may wind up being Denver. In fact, I think it's starting to trend like Denver has sensed. A lot of teams do this. A lot of the teams that have the championship experience, we've seen the Warriors do this. You get to March, and it's go time. And, there is a little hint of, Denver took some L's right before the All-Star break that I think they didn't believe that they should have taken, and they've come out and kind of taken it out on everybody here, their first 5 games. So you never know who you're going to get, but I think the validation comes from getting into a playoff series, number one, and then how much noise you can make regardless of whether you end up playing, say, Denver, OKC, or Minnesota.
Yeah, and look, you got to focus on yourself because of how tightly packed the West is, because you mentioned possibly getting Denver at this point, even if you get the 8th seed, which probably is the most feared team in the entire Western Conference, being the defending champs and the success that they've had against the Warriors for the last 2 years with Jamal Murray back in the lineup. But say you get all the way up to 6 or maybe even 5, you could be playing a Clippers team, which also has by and large had it their way with the Warriors this year. So that's another tough matchup. And I think that seeding isn't going to matter as much in terms of what you're targeting, as much as just the goal of how many wins you can rack up, because you're going to have no control over these matchups, and not even, at least as of the way it stands right now, there's no real way to predict who you would get with a given seed.
No. And it is going to change. And yeah, I mean, you look at the Lakers and Warriors tied. You look at the Warriors a game and a half back at Dallas, 2 back at Sacramento. Sacramento got a big win last night in Minnesota without De'Aaron Fox to help, stabilize themselves. The Pelicans won last night, but from 5 to 10, basically it's a 3-game separation. And there are so many, and 5, 6, 7, and 8, it's basically a 1.5 game separation. So 5, 6, 7, and 8 could change every 2 days. And we're starting to see where really 8, 9, and 10 at this point, or 7, 8, 9, and 10 even, could change every 2 to 3 days based on what the Sacramentos and the Mavs and the Warriors and Lakers. And it's going to be interesting. The Warriors don't play the Kings anymore. They ended up with the 2-2 season series split, but they do have some games coming up against Dallas, 3 of them between now and the end of the regular season. And they do have 2 games coming up against the Lakers, both in LA, one 2 weeks from today, and then the other one in the final week of the season in April. And so those are going to be a couple of really, really big games as to can the Warriors get out of the 9-10 and, the Dallas head-to-head as well. I mean, that you do well in those 5 head-to-head matchups against the Mavs and the Lakers. And at that point, you may find yourself, no worse than 8th, basically. If you could go 4, and I'm not saying 4-1, but if you could go 4-1, even 3-2, you're probably in 8th at that point, as long as you're beating both of those teams.
Yeah, and they're 1-1 with the Pelicans. Is that right? Because I know they have them in the second to last game of the year.
Yeah, 1-1 with the Pelicans. They beat them early and then got thumped back in January on the January
other worst
the 10th.
Game of the year besides the Raptor game.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, you look at where the Warriors are at as far as that matchup goes. And yeah, the Warriors have the game, April 12th, I think it is, against the Pelicans. And that's it. That will determine the tiebreaker. They only play the Pelicans 3 times this season. And so that game on April the 12th will go a long way toward determining just what ultimately happens with the Warriors as far as that goes. We'll see. They're done playing Phoenix. They lost that season series. I know we talked about Sacramento. They split, but when you look at the tiebreakers, it's going to be really hard for the Warriors to have a tiebreaker advantage over Sacramento, because the first tiebreaker between divisional opponents is division record. And so the Warriors are 5-9 in the division because they didn't fare well against the Clippers or the Suns, 2-6 in those 8 games. And the Kings have a 7-6 record in division games. And so basically, and there could be an odd number of games. I know the Kings played Phoenix. They're going to end up playing Phoenix 5 times because of the play-in tournament. So they're going to have an extra divisional opponent there. But it's going to be season
tournament.
Yeah, the in-season tournament back in December. That was their extra game was an extra game. The Warriors ended up going to OKC. The Kings' extra game ended up going to Phoenix, which they actually won that game. So they have a 2-2 split with Phoenix with one game still to come between now and the end of the regular season. So it's a lot is going to change. A lot is going to change on the daily. But when you look at the Warriors, I think, they are controlling what they can control, I think at a really, really high level right now. And I think, the biggest thing, just kind of looking at the last week here, and the Warriors lose the game since we last did this show to Denver, but then they get right back on track against Washington. They're able to beat the Knicks and beat Toronto last night. And I just love the fact that this team has been challenged now with a couple of injuries, right? They've figured everything out in terms of the way they wanted their rotation to be. They figured out the Wiggins and Kuminga thing. They figured out Draymond at center. They figured out Podziemski's going to start over Klay Thompson, right? They figure out Chris Paul's going to be coming off the bench when he comes back from his injury, which he did on Tuesday. And he's going to, maybe play a little bit less of a role than he has play a fewer minutes basically than he did before his January 5th injury. And now you're playing Trace Jackson Davis and you're playing Dario Saric at the 4, not the 5. Like, there's all these things that are different as far as the Warriors' ability to have a rotation and have the ability to really up their game as they have here over the last 19. And now the injuries come, and you knew the injuries were going to come at some point, and injury and or personal. I mean, Wiggins obviously being unavailable, it's not due to an injury, and we always say this, wish Andrew Wiggins the best, hope everything's all right as far as the family and personal issue. But Wiggins is out. We don't know when Wiggins is coming back, although it doesn't sound like it's going to be, 6 weeks from now, like it was a year ago. But we don't know. We really don't know. And the Warriors respecting Wiggins' privacy there. And then Brandon Podziemski goes down. So I think the big tell for the week is Chris Paul's come back and looked really good in his role, looked really good in the bench role. Moses Moody's got an opportunity for Andrew Wiggins and has been best plus minus on the team the last 2 games. And he just is just steady. Just play him at the 3. And whether it's been Podziemski or Klay Thompson, like he's just done his thing. He's defended well. He's made open shots in a couple of games. He's just really been a nice steadying factor. And it goes to the bigger picture point that I bring up a lot, which is once you actually come up with a real rotation, which the Warriors didn't truly have until about a month and a half ago. But once you come up with a firm rotation, then you can plug and play. Then you can say, oh, this player's out, so this player's going to play more. This player's out, this player's going to start now, and we're going to change. It just feels, even with players out, and I'm not surprised, but I do think it was a big question in a box that the Warriors have checked this week. They've been able to just keep this thing going despite taking away from, having Podziemski out and having, Quinones goes back in after he had been playing and then not playing and gets an opportunity. Moody's playing for Wiggins. Like it's all clicking right now for the Warriors. And, that's when it looks like there's actual real depth on this team, right? I mean, you can talk about real depth and having all these guys that can play, but if you can't come up with a way to use them all, and the Warriors really didn't come up with the proper ways to use them all until the end of January, then you don't have great depth. Now, Greg, it looks like the Warriors have great depth because you plug and play when guys are out and you keep the train moving.
Well, and you were one of the first ones to say it when things were starting to go south, which was, I'm so tired of hearing about how deep this team is when the rotation doesn't work. And it felt like, no, they had a bunch of capable NBA players, but nothing was fitting together in a way that it felt like there was any kind of actual depth in terms of, oh, well, one person goes down so we can do this. It was like a constant 4-layered equation of, oh, well, so-and-so is not playing, or we're going to put, Chris Paul in this situation. So what does that mean we do with Dario Saric and Trace Jackson Davis, or do we sit this person on the bench? And it feels like there's starting to be a little bit more of a formula as to what fans can kind of expect for who to see out there. The one thing that has not been as predictable is Moses Moody being left out of the loop only to finally get a real shot at an opportunity. And I'd say being more than capable. That'd be a nice understatement for what Moody has done. I mean, on the ball defense is great. And you mentioned making the nice timely shots. I think what's been great about Moses Moody, JD, is that he hasn't had to justify being on the floor with shooting. Like, that's a Lester Quinones thing a little bit. Like, if he can make some shots, he can justify being on the floor a little bit more. Moses Moody, it's nice when he's making shots. I think you can still play him a good chunk of minutes, even if he's not necessarily hot, because of what he's been doing in every other facet of the game.
Yeah, it hasn't felt like Moody has killed him when he hasn't made shots, but the reality is he's also made shots, for the most part. And I think that always helps. And that has been, really the story of Moody's career in a lot of ways has been, he hasn't consistently made shots in the regular season. Ironically, he does make shots when he gets opportunities in the postseason, which is why, when Steve Kerr has gone to him, he's been pretty effective in those types of situations. But I think, when you start to really look at where the Warriors are at here, they're going to have to find some time for Moses Moody. And we don't know how long Andrew Wiggins is going to be out, but to have Moody be able to step into a specific role, like this isn't what a lot of people would complain about. Well, give him a little Podziemski's minutes and give him a little of give him Quinones's minutes and give him it doesn't work that way. Like, it's not like it. You have to have combinations of players that fit together. I think too often, sometimes fans, Greg, get into this mode of just play this guy's better than that guy. Just play this guy. And it doesn't matter who he's out there with, just play him. And Warrior fans are notorious for coming up with the non-positional matches, right? Play this guy who actually plays the 2 or the 3 over somebody who's playing the 1, right? Play this guy who's actually a 4 over somebody who's a 2. So I
want the big lineup of Trace Jackson Davis, Looney, Garuba, Steph.
Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But that's pretty funny. Yeah, nobody wants that lineup. But Moody's ability to step in and just play the 3, like it works much better when you just have a specific role for a player to be able to plug themselves into. And for the Warriors, it's been, all right, Wiggins is out. Moses, you're going to play the 3 and play it well. And if you play what you're going to get out, you're going to get at least 20 to 25, probably no matter what. But if you play well, maybe you'll get a little bit more. He played 31 minutes in the game last night. And was really effective. I mean, he kept them in the game last night early. Like he had their first 7 point. There was a point last night against Toronto.
Only good player in the first quarter.
He had all their points, and everybody that wasn't Moody was 0 for 4 or 0 for 8 with 4 turnovers at one point. And I loved. So he kept them in it, and then Steph got going toward the end of the first quarter, and then Kuminga got going after a slow start in the second quarter when he came back in right around the 7-minute mark of the second quarter. And then Kuminga had 13 in the last 7 minutes of the first half. He ends up with 11 in the second half, 24. And it ends up being a really nice Kuminga game. And it was basically Steph, Moody, Kuminga when it was all said and done, with some timely shots.
Clay had a nice second half.
Yeah, timely shots from Clay in the second half. And, Chris Paul's been knocking down the 3 ball since he's come back. Like, Chris Paul's been terrific since he's come back. And 24 minutes last night for Chris Paul, not 32 minutes. And part of that is the Warriors, had the game in check. I think Steve Kerr wanted to finish the game with Chris Paul. I mean, he did end up finishing the game with Chris Paul. He was out there at the end. But had it been a closer game, I think there was going to be a night where, Chris Paul's going to be out there. And was out there basically instead of Moses Moody, because Klay Thompson was out there as well as the Warriors were kind of putting the game away.
I want to ask you a question because it relates to something we discussed on last week's Just Dubs, but with 2 different players. So when we talked about Chris Paul coming back into the lineup, and does this mean Podziemski still closes? And you said it has to be determined by Podziemski. Like, if he's having a good night, you let him close the game, as opposed to just, let's just plug Chris Paul in for the sake of doing it. Where do you stand after this last week on the same issue, but with Moody and Wiggins? Like, do you think it's determined by Moses Moody if Andrew Wiggins is going to close games now when he comes back?
It's probably more dependent on Wiggins, honestly. I mean, I think if Wiggins is playing at a certain level, then I think Wiggins is the guy that probably gets the benefit of the doubt. But I do feel like it's a little more, I think it's a little more both, right? I mean, a big part of and look, we don't know, as I've said a couple of times, when Wiggins is going to come back. But, Moses Moody, if Andrew Wiggins doesn't come back for another 10 games and Moses Moody plays like he has the last 3 for the next 10, then they might be having to have a conversation about, does Moses Moody just keep starting? I don't think we're to that point yet, although I can already sense the fan base is probably getting to that point because they kind of discount how well Wiggins has played over the last month and a half. And I do think there's some frustration from the fan base at his repeated absences as well, which I think is, while I understand the sentiment, I think it's wholly unfair given this situation. Like one thing that I despise is the notion, and I'm going to get off on a little bit of a tangent. We can get back into the rotation questions and all of that stuff. But one thing I really do despise is the fact that people want to litigate what's acceptable and what's not as far as Wiggins' absence. Like I feel like there's a frustration that he's not around, one, from the fan base, despite the fact that it's been classified as a very serious personal and family matter. To me, at that point, it's like, all right, let the dude have his time. And we'll figure out when he comes back what it was or how much he wishes to share and all that. But one thing I despise is the people that want to litigate. They basically are like, well, we need to know what it is. We need to know what it is, and then we can debate whether it's acceptable or not. I'm not going to get into the laundry list of what it could be and some of the wild rumors, from last year and all of that. But it's basically, oh, well, if it's X, then, 3 or 4 games is acceptable. If it's Y, then 20 games is acceptable. If it's Z, then damn it, you need to be there the next day and not be missing any game. Like why he's out and whether people think the reason that he's out is legitimate or not is not open for debate. That's one thing that I will just stand firm to. And I did it last year. And, it's frustrating. Like, give the dude his space. To this point, it hasn't really cost the Warriors anything because they've won all 3 games. So I don't think there's anything to be truly angry about. Although, every time there's a tweet about Andrew Wiggins' status, seemingly, and maybe some of it's just social media, but seemingly people are really frustrated, like acting like the dude can't be counted on. And I think that's unfair.
One thing I would like to add to all that, because I fully stand right there with you on all this, JD, and I'm very much team Wiggins, and the Warriors have handled their players and their personal situations very well during this version of the franchise. So I'm not going to debate any of that. I would also say that, one, just from a basketball standpoint alone, if Andrew Wiggins was playing through this personal issue and was not the best version of himself, probably would have hurt the team more than helped the team, and that would have set fans off on a different kind of tangent. Number 2 is that I've seen people online, and I'm going to try to say this very sensibly. I've seen online comments where some people will compare their own personal tragedies or lack of time off at a job when going through something to what is happening with Andrew Wiggins. I feel for anyone and everyone that has to go through a grieving process. It is not fun. I think that employers should always take the route of empathy. But let's just say it's even true that Andrew Wiggins is privileged to get the leeway that he gets. That's kind of just the reality of athletes in a lot of regards. Like,
no doubt.
So what if Andrew Wiggins is privileged? Maybe he is in this scenario. And that doesn't excuse what he might be going through on a personal level or emotionally. And I wish everybody else could get that kind of treatment, as opposed to Wiggins should get less treatment just because others might be.
Yeah, you do see a lot. You're right. You do see a lot of, well, I went through this and I got 1 day, or I went through this and I was still expected to show up. And I'm with you. And you're right. I mean, professional athletes do get more of the benefit of the doubt, more of that privilege. And you know what? That's just part of the deal. As far as the way things work. And so again, I think everybody needs to give Wiggins the benefit of the doubt here. And look, if there's a determination that's made that, look, the organization is obviously always evaluating everything, and they've handled it, I think, in a first-class manner to this point, both last year and this year. And who knows if part of why Wiggins hasn't played great or didn't play great for the first couple months of the season's played better lately, but still not totally, kind of where he was before, is because he was playing through something that maybe he wasn't, maybe he didn't really feel like playing through. And again, I get the flip side of the coin to all of that and the way fans think, and you're making, $25 million a year and all of that, but it doesn't change the notion that we're all human and we all deal with things. And look, anybody that has the ability to take the time to tend to personal matters, and I fully understand the fact that not everybody is granted that, but anybody who does get the opportunity, who is fortunate enough to have the opportunity to be able to take care of those matters when they arise, I think would take it. And so I don't think you can blame, a guy like Andrew Wiggins for that as well. You popped a comment up on the screen there for a quick second, and I didn't get a chance to see it. You want to pop that back up? We can address it, and we can address a bunch of comments.
I'll pop both.
You're in control of that, my man. You have control of the comments at a greater level than some of these Just Dubs or some of the Dubs OT shows that we do. So yeah, if you feel like there's a comment, pop it up on the screen. Even feel free to just leave it there for a minute while we discuss, because it's a good reminder to kind of keep the conversation on point.
Yeah, first of all, if I leave your comment up for only a few seconds, it's because I just don't want it to block half of JD's face.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. We can do that.
This is from Judith, and just talking about Wiggins' absence and kind of comparing it to larger systematic things in the U.S.
Yeah,
but
I think that's
the thing I
right.
liked she said was that Wiggins' situation should raise the bar for others as opposed to Warriors lowering the bar based on what other people might have to deal with in terms of personal leave and that sort of thing. So thank you, Judith. I like that.
No, I think that's spot on. I think that's a really, really well said. And again, this is providing an opportunity independently of what Wiggins is going through for Moses Moody, and Moses Moody's making the most of it. And, that from a team standpoint, when you separate from the rest of it, is, it's given you an opportunity. Douglas Mike's checking in. The Greg Silver lining. I like that. The Greg Silver lining is, and I lost the comment there. I had the wrong screen up. The Greg Silver lining to Wiggins being out is that Moses Moody's finally getting minutes. Yeah. That's, Steve Kerr, I think, wants to play him. I know Douglas Mike's also added that, I think it was Douglas Mike's, that Wiggins and Moody can both start. We'll see. I think that's fair if Moody continues to play well. I do think they still like Podziemski's rebounding one, ability to create offense as a playmaker next to Steph too. So, I think down the line that could be an option, but and this is just the reality, there are some matchups where the Warriors are comfortable playing Moody at the 2, and there are some matchups where they are not at all comfortable with him playing the 2. And I think there's some matchups where they're not even really totally comfortable with him playing the 3, which is why he's found himself on the outside looking in of the rotation. It's so funny how, the Warriors positionless and all this other stuff over the years. The truth is they do tend to put people in. Sometimes it's two-way positions where you play one position on offense and one position on defense. It can be a little bit different there. But part of the reason is at times Moody hasn't been big enough as a wing to play 3 or even small 4, but he also hasn't been quick enough to be a consistent 2. This week, though, he's shown a greater ability to be able to defend on the perimeter, which I think is something that will be his ticket to potentially getting more opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. And, we've mentioned this multiple times on our shows throughout the week. I know I did when I went on with Kerry earlier. I think that was Wednesday when I joined Sports Phone with him. But Moody was very unfortunate in the last time that he would have had an opportunity to play by getting a calf strain and being deprived of the chance to show what he had and get those minutes. So credit to Moody for taking advantage of this opportunity. I think a lot of Dub Nation is very much on his side. And like you mentioned yesterday, JD, he was, in fact, the only effective player for the first 8 minutes of that game until Steph really got going.
Yeah, he was terrific. And the Warriors have needed him to be terrific so far. And so, I mean, I think you'll gladly take it. And, does it lead down the road of, I think it's too soon to say, well, is Moody going to have to start for Wiggins when Wiggins comes back? Is Moody going to have to start for Podziemski? I think people have been I think fans have been a little more kind of frustrated with Podziemski because he hasn't shot the ball as well as, he's been up and down this season in terms of shooting the ball. I think shooting the ball is the last, that's not really why he's on the court to begin with. To me, it's the other things. It's the willing defense. It's the charges. It's the ball movement. It's the ability to get into the lane and look to kick out and keep the Warriors' semblance of flow offensively rolling. And so I think Podziemski's rebounding is rebounding. He rebounds. He might be their best rebounder among the starting lineup at this point. So rebounding is at the top of that's near the top of the list among the other things that I mentioned. And so, I don't think there's going to be this push to give him Podziemski's spot. I also think it's probably too soon to say, all right, we're going to give him Wiggins' spot as well. But the ability for him to just step in has been huge because it's allowed the Warriors to keep the momentum rolling. And that was my one little fear, my one concern as the Warriors figured everything out is what happens when the injuries come, and not necessarily the injuries or missed time in Wiggins' case, not necessarily with Steph or like Draymond. Like that's just, if you lose Steph or Draymond, you're just in big trouble. Like you're not going to be able to overcome that. But basically anybody else, could the Warriors overcome that? And I think to this point, they have shown short sample size that they can and have been able to overcome it, which is the only way they're going to get out of the 9 or the 10 seed is by injuries be damned. They continue to play at the level that they've played at since January 24th or January 30th, wherever you want to pick your starting point.
Yeah, this might be a little bit of a polarizing opinion. I think that if Chris Paul's injured, it'd be really tough to get through the duration of a playoff series. And that's hard because he has not been a very durable player in the postseason for the last 2-3 years of his career. But I think Chris Paul, 1, has been terrific in his role since he's come back. And 2 is, you look at like the Knicks game, for example, there was the play where Steph dribbled it off his foot and then it was a turnover. And I think that cut it to like 4 points. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, like here we go again with the fourth quarter demons. Even though Chris Paul doesn't necessarily go into takeover mode, I would have to think it is a lot more relaxing for Warrior fans to have someone out there that can create offense when the Warriors do that thing in the fourth quarter when they forget how to run offense, when they have a 15-point lead. Like, I think that's been a big difference, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's been big in some of the game. Now, the flip side to that, the pushback on that is if Chris Paul's out there, then you're probably playing really small and you're leaving yourself vulnerable in other ways. And so, I think there are some nights where I do think in a playoff series, when you're trying to hold a lead, it's going to be important to have Chris Paul out there, but it's not going to be easy to just have Chris Paul be the guy. I do think Steve Kerr is going to be more willing than the fan base wants to have Chris Paul basically be the guy. And all right, Podziemski's not going to play. Or if last night had been a 1 or a 2 possession game, Chris Paul was finishing that game and Moses Moody basically wasn't, because he had Klay Thompson out there as well. So it was that lineup of Steph with Chris Paul and Klay at the 3 and Kuminga and Draymond Green. Like that was the lineup that, and I can already see, what happened earlier in the year would have been the Warriors lose that game and everybody screams that Moses Moody should have been out there, and Steve Kerr blew the game because he didn't play Moses Moody down the stretch. So it's going to be tricky and much easier said than done to figure out the right combination as far as who's gonna finish these games. Curry's going to be out there. Draymond's going to be out there. You think Kuminga's probably going to be out there. Although I'll say this: I don't. If Kuminga's having a bad game and there are other players that are having a good game in the playoffs, I don't think Kuminga necessarily, is a lock to finish every single. He's probably a lock to finish most games at this point. But
yeah, and you would want him to be able to be out there.
Absolutely. But I don't, I think he would probably be after Steph and Draymond right now, the next closest lock for sure. But then it becomes, all right, is Clay going to be out there or is Podziemski going to be out there? Is Wiggins going to be out there or is Moody going to be out there? Which combinations of those groups are going to be out there at the end of the game? Is GP2 going to be out there? Like, it's the same conversation.
Don't forget about the spot subs on GP2.
Yeah. And so, I think that becomes the question as we get closer to the playoffs, and if the Warriors do find themselves ultimately in a playoff series, you throw everything out the window and you just do what you think is best. But there are so many of these decisions that didn't work out in the first half of the season for the Warriors. They haven't quite been in as many of these positions in the last few weeks because they've been playing at a higher level to where they've been winning without having to do that. But they also have had enough players out, I think, where the decisions have been relatively easy for Steve Kerr. It's been Clay or Podziemski. It basically has been because Chris Paul's been out and Moses Moody was so far out of the rotation that he wasn't somebody that was going to be where people were going to be screaming that he should be basically finishing games. And so I think it's interesting when you look at it as far as what the Warriors are going to do in these games and in playoff games, which obviously are contingent on matchups and all of that.
Yeah, it's never a dull day, especially in this season. It's been all over the place all the time, but it's nice to see that the Warriors have some identity, they have some form, they have some clarity in terms of if so-and-so doesn't play, then we could put this person in. And look, they're not beating the best of teams or teams at full strength right now, but when you're the 9 seed, you can't worry about any of that. You take everything that's given to you. I think tomorrow is going to be a really fun test because they do typically play well in Boston, but Boston's also 28-3 at home. What do you say we take a quick pause and get to that
Sure.
after the little break?
Yeah, we'll take a quick pause. We'll dig into the comments. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. It is Just Dubs with JD and Greg Silver here for KNBR, the sports leader. All right, we're back. Just Dubs here on a Saturday. John Dickinson, Greg Silver for KNBR, the sports leader, as we come to you on the KNBR YouTube page, also on Twitch, as well as streaming live on Twitter/X. So we're going to keep this thing rolling for a little over an hour. We'll keep it rolling till about noon here. Appreciate everybody watching. This show will be out in a podcast form. And we're going to definitely, make sure through all the social media channels that everybody knows where we are, when we are. If there's some Giants conflicts, we're still going to be doing this show, but we're going to be doing the YouTube stream only editions. And tomorrow is going to be a YouTube only Dubs OT show, YouTube, Twitch, and X Dubs OT show here for KNBRs. We're going to be live immediately following the Warriors and the Celtics, the final game of the 4-game road trip. I know, Greg, you were talking about just how good the Celtics have been. 10 in a row. They are 47-12 overall. They have the best record in the NBA. They have the best record in the NBA by basically 5.5 games over the next closest team, 8 in the East. But looking at it, the quick math, about 5.5 over Minnesota, who currently is first in the Western Conference with OKC and Denver hot on their heels. The Warriors did beat the Celtics back on December the 19th. It was one of the Warriors' better wins of the young season as they won in overtime at Chase Center. It was an ugly first quarter where the Warriors gave up 40 points and trailed 40-30. It was an ugly third quarter as well for the Warriors. They found themselves down big. But the Warriors rallied in not only the second quarter to make it a 3-point game at halftime, but they were down 11 going to the fourth quarter, and the Warriors were able to force overtime in that one and ultimately win it 132-126 with an 11-5 advantage in the OT. And that was a Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Jonathan Kuminga game, basically, with Steph having 33, hit 6 threes. Klay hit 6 threes in that game. And Jonathan Kuminga, when he stayed away from the three ball, was 7 for 9 on twos and had 17 points with 7 boards, a couple of assists, and a couple of steals. So Kuminga really made an impact.
About Trace Jackson Davis having the big block on Jaylen Brown in overtime.
Yeah, he was a game best plus 25 in the game. Trace Jackson Davis was, and played among the most minutes. I'm not sure off the top of my head if it's the most minutes he's played. I don't have the Trace Jackson Davis game log up, but he played 29 minutes in that game with the overtime. And so, yeah, Trace Jackson Davis, 10 points, 13 rebounds. That was back during that stretch where Trace Jackson Davis really was first getting an opportunity to play a little bit and was relatively effective. Remember, he had a game in Portland right before that game against Boston where he was pretty effective as well. So, yeah, Trace Jackson Davis helping the Warriors in that game. But, yeah, much different team at that point. No Draymond Green on that night at Chase. But Brandon Podziemski started that game. It was Steph with Klay and Podziemski. So Klay playing the 3. Kuminga started in that game at the 4 with Kevon Looney at the 5. Kevon Looney really struggled, but it opened the door for Trace Jackson Davis to get minutes in the game. Andrew Wiggins really struggled. And that was a game where Chris Paul was playing a lot down the stretch and at the end. 35 points for 35 minutes for Chris Paul.
Was that the game where Steve Kerr just said, screw it, and I'm going to play the same 5 down that whole stretch and just ride it out?
Exactly. And it was, I believe it was CP3, Klay, Steph, Kuminga, and Trace Jackson Davis, basically, who made the run and forced the game into overtime. And so there are some players with the Warriors that pose some matchup problems. Look, the Celtics were 500 on the road at that point. They were in the midst of I think the beginning of a Western trip at that point. But you look at them since that game, and they were 20-6 after that game. So they're 27-6 since that game. And it's funny, they're 13-3 on the road since that game. They're 28-3 overall at home. And so, yeah, you look at the Celtics, and they've been unbelievable. And yeah, they have, as Raider Tupac points out, that the Celtics have as long a road winning streak as the Warriors do at this point. And their last 3 losses, Boston's last 3 losses, have all been at TD Garden. So should be a fun matchup. The Warriors have been able to have some success against Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown gives them a lot of trouble, but they've been able to make Tatum turn the ball over and be a volume shooter in games where he has to score. And I think that's really flipped a lot of the games the Warriors have won. It's been because they've been able to make Jason Tatum have a bad game, even if Jason Tatum ends up scoring at a pretty high level.
Yeah, you hit it right there with Jason Tatum struggling relative to what he normally does, and Jaylen Brown playing really well against the Warriors. I'm just looking forward to this one just as a basketball fan. I mean, for the Warriors to go into the environment where they were playing in the finals, a really hostile environment of good fans, a good home crowd, and to do that on a little Sunday afternoon, a team that's the best record in the NBA, 28-3 at home, Warriors are rolling. This could be a huge win for them, and to sweep the season series against Boston, which would sound so unlikely for everything that this Warriors season has been. But it's like, it's not playing with house money in the sense of they can lose the game and it doesn't matter. But I do think that out of all of the games over the last, 2 months, probably, this one is probably on the lower end of pressure that they should be feeling to go into this game. So I hope they come out with good energy. They're feeling loose. Hopefully Steve Kerr doesn't have to call a timeout and start putting up shots or yelling at the whole team. I don't think that would go so well. That was great. That was hilarious.
Love that. Both the first time out where he takes the shot and then the second time out where he just lit into everybody. I like the second time out more than even the first time out. And we talked about it last night. I just thought that was perfectly timed with respect to just letting the team know that they may lose the game, but they're not going to lose the game because of low effort, and there aren't going to be any excuses as to getting in at 3, getting in at 7 in the morning and all that kind of stuff. Like, you might play a bad game, you might lose, but you're going to be getting back on defense. You're not going to be screwing up after the timeout plays, and you're going to not be, allowing wide open threes because you can't rotate defensively. Like, that was the perfect moment. And I know Steve doesn't do it a lot. I think he actually could do it a little bit more than he does and still have it not be overbearing or overwhelming. But I loved the timeout in that moment and just lighten into his team. I think it kind of salvaged the game at that point, right? They were down 14-7. It felt like it could have been worse. Steph got on a little bit of a heater after that. And, Moody helped him through that first quarter. Then Kuminga got going. And then they basically controlled the game, I thought, even though they were down from the second quarter on. It felt like the run was coming in the game last night. But, yeah, mini tangent. I loved that time. I loved the angry timeout and just lighten into everybody.
I think a lot of fans love the angry timeout too, because, for a lot of the Kerr criticism this year, yes, it's been lineups and management of young players have kind of been at the top of the list, but also I think people will think that he doesn't necessarily hold the vets accountable sometimes, which I don't believe at all, but I'm just saying that is a sentiment that's out there. He just fully lit everybody up, and I know it originally looked like he was coming right at Kuminga. I think Kuminga was just the one that was kind of closest to the situation. He looked pretty pissed off at everybody. Yeah, it was, I mean, if you wanted to not be super angry at Moody, I guess that would have been kind of justified, but I think he was just angry in general.
No doubt. I want to go back to the Celtics game as we were kind of talking about, it's just Dubs, JD, Greg Silver here for KNBR, the sports leader. We'll get back into some more comments here on the YouTube chat. Appreciate everybody who's watching and commenting here on a Saturday morning, as we're going to be doing this every Saturday morning, YouTube, Twitch, and on Twitter/X here for the sports leader. A lot of eyeballs on tomorrow. And we kind of started the show with one of our questions of the night from Dubs OT last night. And there's going to be a lot of eyeballs. And the question was, do the Warriors need a win against a quality opponent to validate the hot streak that they've been on of late? And I think we both agree that they don't. I know there were a few people last night that said, well, they already beat Boston. I know it's a different iteration. We kind of discussed that a little bit earlier. But I think as much as this matters, and you may tell me, Greg, it doesn't matter a lick, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to look at the Warriors' last 16 to 20 games and without having watched how they've played and look at tomorrow as basically the determining factor as to whether or not what they're doing is real or not. And if you go to Boston and you don't play well, or you go to Boston and you lose, you go to Boston, you lose a blow a lead, any of the things that have, not been good for the Warriors when they've lost games this year. I do think that there is going to be a lot of, and again, I think fans are part of this. I think, because I do think fans get caught up in some of the national media narratives and start to believe a lot of that stuff, even if it can be hogwash. But the Warriors have been through it all. Again, I know they don't give a damn, but I do think there are going to be a lot of eyeballs on tomorrow and a lot of opinions formed as to, if the Warriors go in there and win, it's going to be, all right, this team is a legitimate contender. If the Warriors go in there and lose, it's like, yeah, what the Warriors are doing is cute, but they're still the 10 seed in the West. Like, let's see where things are April 14th.
I think it's how they lose would really say a lot about the narrative. And again, the Warriors internally don't care about it. But if they blow a lead, like they've done for the first half of the season many times, to a Celtics team that just grabs it by the throat and takes it for themselves, that would be bad. If they come out and get punked, like first part of the Raptors game last night, but there's no turnaround factor, that's also going to be a problem. I think if they play them close and lose, or it's kind of like, I know a lot of people reacted strongly to the Denver game. I think if it's similar to the Denver game last week, I'm personally not freaking out about it, or it's like the better team just plays better and kind of wears you down. I think if they blow a big lead or they just get completely slaughtered, then we're having a different discussion, as opposed to, they played a good team and they just didn't quite finish it. Or, Steph Curry maybe didn't have a good game again, or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think, and Courtney Fox pointed this out earlier, right, as we got rolling and first broached the question in the chat. I think Greg nailed it. Courtney writes, no, they didn't need the win. Or they don't need the win to validate them, but the win could generate some serious momentum and confidence for the team. Yeah, I think that is probably the number one most important point. It becomes kind of a springboard, right? These next two games, really, at Boston and then Milwaukee when you come back home off the trip. Now, the Warriors do get a couple of days off. It's interesting. I was looking at the schedule, as I do often, and I was just kind of thinking, because you'd made the point on Dubs OT. You said, man, there's been a lot of 3 and 4s, it seems like, for the Warriors, right? Like right before the break and then right out of the break. And then there's been another one here these last 4 days with the beginning of this trip, with the games on Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I just thought, you look at how many games are left for the Warriors, and you look at where they are currently in the standings and just kind of go through the schedule, and you're like, damn, like, there are only two more times where the Warriors have 2 days off in between a game. It's after Sunday. They have 2 days off before they play Boston, I mean, before they play Milwaukee, after they play Boston. And then they have 2 days off before they play the Lakers 2 weeks from tonight in LA in a Saturday night ABC showcase game. And
that's on a road trip, by the way.
Other than that, yeah, that's on a road trip where they go to San Antonio and Dallas first, and then we'll come back and have some time in LA to maybe get have a night off and maybe get a practice in before they play that game on the Saturday 2 weeks from tonight. So it's interesting because I think like these games are like they are going to have to really fight through and continue the positive momentum that they've built, but it's going to get harder because there aren't going to be breaks. I mean, it is. I was looking at it from that night. Basically, there's 30 days to go from that Laker game 2 weeks. There's 30 days, and the Warriors play 17 of the 30. Like it's either every other day or a back-to-back, and there's 3 back-to-backs in that final 30 days. So basically a month when you from March 16th to April 14th. It's 30 nights, 17 games. There are no instances where they have more than 1 day off. And so they're going to have to rely on everybody. They really are going to have to rely on everybody and rely on momentum and rely on a set rotation and avoid injury if they want to keep this thing rolling.
They're just embracing baseball season coming, I think, at this point with a rate like that. But yeah, no, you're right. 30 days, 17 games. Geez, that's a lot. And only one of those was rescheduled, right? That was only.
Yeah, only one was
rescheduled.
Right. Only one was added. They moved a home game. They were going to play Dallas on the road on April 2nd as part of a 7-game trip, and they made that a home game, but then they send the Warriors back out on the road. So they go from San Antonio home to play the Mavs, and then they go back to Houston, but they play Houston and Dallas back to back. So they go Sunday the 31st at San Antonio, Tuesday at home against Dallas, Thursday back on the road against San Antonio. It was just going to be San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, and then you come back home, all 3 in a row there in Texas. But now they wedge the home game against Dallas, which is the makeup game, and then they flip the road game, which was going to be on April 2nd, to now the second of a back-to-back after they play Houston on the 4th. And then you come home and you go 7, you go 7, 9, 11, 12, and 14. A couple of those games are on the road, but it's every other day and or back to back. So that is a treacherous schedule. And if anything, the next 2 weeks, the Warriors do get a little bit more breathing room, although they get the 2 days off coming off the road trip, and then they have immediately 3 and 4 right out of the chute before going right back out on the road. So tomorrow is, I think, and these next 2, to bring it back to that point, I do think are real springboard games. If they're able to win both or even split them, and they're winning these other games that are coming up against Chicago and San Antonio, they're really going to have a lot of momentum going into the back end of that next trip, which is Dallas and the Lakers. And those are obviously some of the more important games that the Warriors have here between now and the end of the season. 3 against Dallas, 2 against the Lakers, and then the 1 against the Pelicans coming up on April the 12th.
Yeah, I mean, while we're on the whole crazy schedule talk, I'll put Courtney's comment back up there. I'll give her a shout out back, because when I put the YouTube link up this morning, she's like, I haven't even finished Dubs OT from last night. We do get a little bit maniacal on the weekends, and that's partially because we're maniacs, and it's partially because the Warriors play a lot of games, and we're just trying to stay afloat here. But no, it's a good time, and yeah, I mean, gonna be a crazy month of March coming up and first half of April.
Yeah, looking forward to it, and it's going to be a lot of fun talking Dubs. It has been over the last month, and this team's playing really high level quality basketball. 13-3 in the last 16, 14-5, as I've said, since January 24th. They've won 8 in a row on the road. Can they make it 9 back in Boston? We shall see. But this team's got it dialed right now. As the thing that gives me the most optimism that they can continue to keep it rolling, Greg, is the fact that all the pieces now fit together greater than they have at any point this season. And it's the same players, but it's the same players in proper roles set up to be effective. And now you have that ultimate ability to mix and match, plug and play as far as, guys going out and other guys getting opportunities based on other players going out.
Yeah, I think that's really nicely put. Do you think that we see a lot of Trayce Jackson-Davis tomorrow, knowing the kind of impact he had? Yeah.
I think we should. Yeah, I think I think we absolutely should. Look, he's to the point now where he's playing every game. And that that's part of what we're talking about, right? Like he's at the point now where he's playing in every game, and that gives Steve Kerr the opportunity to see if he's got it on a given night. And if he's got it and he's impactful, then he can play more on that particular night. And I think that really helps. So, I think, and you saw, last night, Steve Kerr went away from Dario Saric, which I think is something that's been coming. But in the second half, he went away from Dario Saric and he changed his rotation a little bit. He put Trayce Jackson-Davis in for Kuminga in the third quarter and played Trayce Jackson-Davis and Draymond at the 5 and the 4, respectively. Then he had Payton and Chris Paul come in. He had Gary Payton basically come in for Draymond at that point, and then had moved Trayce Jackson-Davis to the 5. But they basically flip-flopped TJD and Looney and used that as an opportunity to get Kuminga more run at the start of the fourth quarter. They basically they flip-flopped it to get Kuminga out there with Looney as opposed to Kuminga out there with Trayce Jackson-Davis, and they flip-flopped it to basically allow for Kuminga to take Saric's minutes at the beginning of the fourth quarter. And so Kuminga ended up, because he was so impactful last night, getting that opportunity to play more minutes. And I think that was, on a night like last night, that was necessary.
Yeah. And I would say this, I've generally defended the side of Steve Kerr much more than not. And that's been a polarizing topic at times this year. But I think when it comes to postseason time, if they get into a playoff series, he's not just going to screw around with his rotations. I think he has hard decisions to make in terms of the closing lineup, right? Like, we've had plenty of discussions about what do you do with Podziemski or Chris Paul or Klay Thompson? Like, it's not going to be easy, but I also don't think we're going to see him screw around in the sense of, like, last night. Dario Saric wasn't just going to play a bunch of minutes in the second half just for the sake of playing minutes in a game that was close and you needed to win. Like, I don't think we're going to see this sense of, I don't really know what we're doing in terms of who's going to be out there.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right about it. There's just more of an order to all of it. And it made it, I think, really frustrating to talk about and analyze, because the Warriors were always earlier in the season, Greg, in this situation where somebody wasn't playing and you could understand why that player maybe wasn't playing, but then the other pieces weren't working. There were players that were playing well, but it wasn't exactly leading to success. And no matter, and it was never as simple as just play these 5 or play that group together or whatever. You had Klay Thompson, who was terrible. You had Andrew Wiggins, who was going through whatever Andrew Wiggins was going through, not playing well at the beginning of the season. You had Podziemski, who was making an impact. You had Kuminga, who was really not great at the beginning of the season, and then started to turn it around in the early part of December, and then was a little up and down at the end of December, beginning of January, and then has really come on basically since January the 12th in Chicago, when the Warriors went on that road trip. after they kind of had bottomed out there with the home losses to Toronto and the Pelicans. So none of it fit, and now it feels like all of it fits. And so the Warriors, find themselves again. Biggest reason that I have optimism for this team moving forward is the way that they're functioning in terms of their rotation. And, Kuminga's role makes sense now. Draymond's role makes sense now. They're playing Trace Jackson-Davis. They're not playing Saric at the 5. Klay Thompson's coming off the bench. Podziemski's contributing. Wiggins is playing with Kuminga, which was something that really had to happen if this team was going to be successful. Moody had been iced, and we can get into all the Moody, should have been this, should have been that. Moody now is being granted the Wiggins minutes, and in that role, he's being effective, and that's helping this team. So it all fits, which I think that gives the Warriors their best chance to remain competitive and continue to flourish here over what is going to be a real big stretch between now and the end of the season. Let's go ahead and pause here for a quick break. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch for KNBR. This is Just Dubs. We do it every Saturday morning, 10 a.m. until noon. It's JD and Greg Silver here for KNBR, the sports leader. All right, we're back. It is Just Dubs here on a Saturday. John Dickinson, Greg Silver here on KNBR, the sports leader. As we appreciate everybody as always watching here on YouTube and Twitch and Twitter. A lot of great comments here over the course of the show. We appreciate everybody as always watching and chiming in here in the stream as we do this each and every Saturday here for KNBR, the sports leader. A couple of comments you want to get to, Greg? Let's try to talk to the people a little bit. We can kind of run through top to bottom. I'll kind of dealer's choice to you, my friend, as far as what you want to bring in here.
Yeah, well, I know we addressed Courtney's comment up at the top. We got a lot of greetings. What's up to you, Matt? No cap.
Love those.
Checking in. CA, big Just Dubs fan. Yeah,
appreciate you, CA.
Good mornings. We had the great silver lining pun as well. Judith chiming in.
Yeah,
we got
terrific.
Draymond as a stretch 5. So yeah, just kind of scrolling down the list. We had some Wiggins discourse, which we got to. JD, you got a big fan in Conway Rocks.
All right, thanks, Conway.
We had Rockin' New Era is also thanking us for the Giants coverage. Hey, listen, no thank you necessary. If we're gonna be put off by things coming up at the last minute, then why would we work in sports?
That's it, man. And I'm just glad that it happened before we got off the air, because if it had happened about 5 minutes later, we would have been off the air. And
I say 2 minutes.
It would have been a lot harder at that point to get us back and talking about it. Once you go into off-air mode, you go into off-air mode. And so, yeah, I think it might've been a different story. Although I think Copes had said he was going to pop in and do some time, no matter what. So we appreciate him, joining us. And I was great talking to him and great talking about the Matt Chapman signing. And we'll see if the Giants have something else in store here moving forward. Mac Hawk down 7 matchups against Dallas, the Lakers and Pelicans remaining. Is it 7 or is it 6?
I was going to say, I think it's 3 Dallas.
I think it's 6. Yeah, it's 3 Dallas. I know I had forgotten that first matchup against Dallas. The Warriors did play Dallas at Chase right before New Year's, and Dallas beat them. So Dallas has the one up on the season series there. And then, yeah, they're going to play on the Warriors' next road trip after the one that they get off tomorrow in Dallas on March the 13th, which is a Wednesday afternoon and evening. And then they play April 2nd and April 5th in Chase Center on April 2nd, which is the opposite of what the original schedule had it as. We talked about that in the last hour. And then April 5th, that game has been added at Dallas, which will be the second of a back-to-back, with the Warriors playing Houston, who they've owned, and then Dallas before coming home. But, yeah, the 2 games against the Lakers here 2 weeks from tonight, they're both in L.A., the 2 games against the Lakers, that March 16th game, and then the other one is April 9th when the Warriors go to L.A. and Portland as part of what will be their final little 2-game Western road trip before coming home to play the Pelicans and the Jazz on the final 2 games of the season. So, yeah, those are all highly important games for the Warriors. And those are the games. Every game in many ways carries equal weight, but some of those games, I think against those opponents specifically, carry the most weight because they are the teams that are in that group that we're talking about as far as when you look at the Western Conference standings.
Yeah, I mean, we've addressed a lot of good comments today. Really good chat contributions from everyone. Douglas Mikes brought up something that I'd also like to address before I forget about it and get lost, which was talking about the Celtics. And do we think the Warriors regret not trading for Porzingis because of how cheap they probably could have gotten him for?
You'd have to refresh my memory as to what the potential rumors and deals were. The short answer is yes. I don't remember Was he going to be like? Were they going to try to do something with Jordan Poole with him? Was he going to be part of that deal? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, the timeline for it is getting me a little bit lost too.
Well, I'm looking at I'm looking at Porzingis's contract. Yeah, Porzingis was looking at his deal. I got a bunch of pop-ups come up here when I brought up this website. Yeah, he had a player option for this year for $36 million. So basically, he had been making 33 with the Wizards. And so, it was one of those, well, would you have taken Porzingis? We would have gotten Porzingis and not Chris Paul, basically. And you would have traded Jordan Poole there. I do think, I think they like having Chris Paul, but I seeing the way that Porzingis has played with the Celtics makes me think that he could have been a really productive player for the Warriors in a way that really could have potentially helped them.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to compare the two very different positions. I think it's hard to say Porzingis wouldn't have been nice to have for the Warriors, but you've also seen how the Hall of Famers respond to Chris Paul, and I think he's been great for the development of a lot of young players too. Like, I don't know, and I don't want to go down the sheer speculation route, but like, I don't necessarily know where Jonathan Kuminga's game would be right now if it was Porzingis and not Chris Paul, or what Dario Saric would have been for this team. But size would have helped. I don't think Porzingis would have been the solution to defending Jokic or anything like that.
No, I think he would have added a legitimate big man scoring threat, which inside and outside, mid range, outside, all of that. The one thing I will say about Porzingis is if you were going to wind up with Porzingis, he would be playing the 5, and then Draymond would be like, I think it really in a lot of ways would have kneecapped Kuminga, because you would have had to have him and Draymond out there together a lot. And then where does Kuminga fit into the equation? Because Kuminga's basically played exclusively at the 4. Now I think Kuminga would have been playing when Draymond would have been out and all of that. And so, I don't know that they regret it. I do think watching the way that he's played with Boston, though, talking about Porzingis, that he could have really helped the Warriors in a lot of different ways. But I think it's all worked out. I mean, and that would have been a one-off kind of a year anyway. But I don't think Kuminga would be getting the opportunities that he's received if Kristaps Porzingis was on the team, just based on the fact that Draymond would be playing a lot of 4. And that would sort of leave Kuminga as you're going to play Kuminga at the 3. Again, I don't think the Warriors want to really do that at this point. And I don't think they were prepared to do it at the beginning of the year under really any circumstances. So, I think the way that it worked out has probably worked out best for everybody.
Yeah. And again, like, if Jonathan Kuminga was put in the doghouse a little bit more, I don't know if he would have gotten moved at the trade deadline. Like, there's just so much to speculate on, and I'm thankful that Kuminga has really grown into this role that we've seen him in this year, because, I mean, I don't think there's really anything to complain about for the most part. He's done a lot of the little things better. He finishes inside. I was telling our guy Kyle Har last night when we were cutting sound for the Warrior game, when he had those dunks, I'm like, being able to jump higher than everybody else at the rim has to give you some confidence in terms of finishing inside. And he's made that the primary focus of his game as opposed to taking threes. And it would be great for him to eventually develop a shot. But I think the way in which Kuminga has gone step by step in terms of improving his game, not just the way he looks to score, but also doing some of the little things that Steve Kerr wanted him to do. Like, you're not seeing Kuminga on as much of a short leash as he was getting for the better part of those first 2.5 years of his career. I think he would have been yanked really early in the game yesterday had that game been back in November. but I think he's been allowed to play through his mistakes more because he has been doing more of the little things to contribute to wins, and therefore he's able to erase maybe some of the minor mistakes he's doing, whether it's entirely him or just a team breakdown. And he's gotten the trust of the coaching staff to the point where he's playing a lot of these clutch time minutes, and they clearly do need him at the 4 position.
Yeah, they need him. And look, I love when Kuminga leaves the 3 behind and leaves the turnaround jumpers alone and gets into the 2-man game with Curry and basically looks to just attack the rim at all costs. And even if teams are going to try to take it away, sometimes you do have to take a 3 just to keep the defense honest. I get the impression, I've said this a lot, I get the impression that Kuminga kind of inherently wants to take those 3s. Like, I think he wants to take those turnaround jumpers where he's just, Jason Tatum or Kobe or, whatever. But so I think trying, maybe that's something that comes for him down the line. But for now, I think one of the biggest changes, in addition to the little things that he's done at a much higher level, I think one of the biggest changes is he's really, and the coaching staff has told him, just some 3s you have to take, but just turn them down, like keep turning them down, keep the ball moving quickly, and you'll get it back in another position where you can be, more successful. Keep putting your head down and looking to drive, put a pump fake on, even if they're not really guarding you out at the 3-point line, and try to get into the lane, give it up and get it back. Like those kinds of things I think have really helped Kuminga flourish. And, last night he took a little turnaround jumper early, I thought it was a bad 3 early. But then he ditched all that the second time around and got to the basket. And, I say this all the time, and where it's going. I think when you look at it, it's really been able to work out. You can put that comment back up. I was going to read that comment. JD, I got to give it to you, man. I was one that believed JK's position was the 3. You were always adamant that his best spot with us was at the 4. Yeah, I mean, it just makes too much sense. Like he's basically he's the modern day version of a post threat in a lot of ways, right? Whether it's dunks and slashes. I think even some of the ISOs around the basket are okay, as long as you don't get too carried away with those. But it's also the combinations of players that you have to have him out there with. And if he's playing the 3, then what, you're going to play Draymond and Trace Jackson Davis? You're going to play Draymond and Looney? You're going to play, like, it limits you in other areas, as well as his in today's day and age, Kuminga is a 4. And with his skill set, maybe it evolves again. Maybe he gets more of a perimeter game, a better handle moving forward. And then that's when he can potentially turn into a 3/4. But no, I think getting Kuminga to accept that his best role and best pathway to play a lot now and to be the most impactful at the 4 was also part of the low key aspect that the coaching staff had to convince him. Because I think Kuminga, and I said this a lot, I thought Kuminga viewed himself as a 3. I thought Kuminga viewed himself as a put the ball on the deck, ISO out on the perimeter, pull up jumpers. And like, again, I think he views himself more as like or viewed himself more of like a Kawhi or a Paul George, or, one of those wings that would hit that pull up jumper, as opposed to just look to put your head down and get all the way to the basket. And I think the Warriors said, you need to be getting all the way to the basket. And he's done it over and over and over and over and over again. Courtney Fox, you want to read this one? You can read this one.
I mean, I would just say that, in fairness to Kuminga, I think everybody not named Moses Moody came out looking like their plane took off at 4:30 in the morning. So that one I'll excuse him for. But yeah, I think the second part of that point is fantastic, where he did respond like a vet. I think he's responded great to mistakes. And I think a lot of that has to do with the votes of confidence that he's been getting, not just from the coaching staff in terms of giving him a longer leash, but also your Chris Pauls, your Draymonds, your Stephs, your Clays. I thought that Chris Paul cut last night was so funny when he said Kuminga probably hated us for the beginning of the season because of how much we were on his game. But I think it's probably found a much better place right now.
No doubt. And yeah, I always say, Steve Kerr, Steph, Clay, Draymond, Chris Paul, maybe to a lesser extent Clay, because I don't think Clay is not the leader in the ways that the other three are. But those three, maybe take Clay out of it, Steph, CP, and Draymond, they are extensions of Steve Kerr. And so those four are aligned, I think, for the most part in everything. And so, for Chris to say it basically tells me that Steph and Draymond and Steve were all aligned on that. As far as, and he has, that's a great point as far as him. There have been games where he doesn't come out. There have been a number of games where he comes out and he misses some shots, or he's a little uneasy. Maybe he's I'm not saying sleepwalking or anything like that. I do think I will say this. And so I'm kind of getting off on a little side. It won't be a tangent, I promise. But I do think at times Kuminga does carry himself like he's he's afforded the same, hey, the vets are a little sleepy tonight. I can be a little sleepy. It's like, no, dude. You do not, Steph can be a little sleepy. Draymond can be a little sleepy. Because I'm a starter, because I'm a number 2 scorer now, because I can come out and kind of just not have it or coast at the beginning of a game. It's like, no, dude, you're starting and you're on this team because you're the antithesis of that. That's part of why you're in the role, because you are youthful energy. You are there to help pull the veteran players up on the nights that they have it. You're not there to match their low level of energy. And yeah, he got, again, I'm not knocking anybody for being tired last night. I'm with you 100%. But I think at times he's like, oh, I'm one of these dudes now. And remember, that was, and in a different way, that was what did Jordan Poole in, right? Jordan Poole was like, I'm in this clique. I'm at the future Hall of Famers table. It's like, no, you're really not. You're helping us, but you're not, but you're kind of in your own category, which allows this whole thing to work. And I think Kuminga, as much as he's been propped up, he's still, they need him to do things that the other big 3 players don't do. And that's, I think, a huge part of his value. And then the other thing that I'll say, Greg, is that, JK really, there have been games where he hasn't had it at the beginning and he comes back in that second stint or a second quarter stint and gets it going. And last night's a perfect example. He was 0 for 4. He was getting, stopped at the rim. He took a bad 3. I thought he took a bad turnaround 15-foot jumper. But he comes back in the second quarter and he dominates. And the Warriors really did a nice job getting him the ball, head of steam, going to the basket. I think they're doing a much better job running stuff for him. I love the Curry Kuminga pick and roll. I love Curry setting screens for Kuminga to get open, cutting to the basket. I think they're figuring out the best ways to have him be the most effective. And I think that's been a big part of the reason why he's had that success.
Yeah, well, going back to a couple of question of the nights ago, where we talked about what was Kuminga's best game of the season. And I know on that poll, we put the Phoenix game. I think that was a really prime example of what you're talking about, where he had an okay start to that game. He picked up a couple early fouls, got taken out in the second quarter. Then I thought he really carried that second unit offensively. And then I think I didn't address this directly on Dubs OT, but another element, what made me so impressed with that game, not just in terms of how he responded to a playoff-like atmosphere there at Chase Center against the Suns, but he picked up a 4th foul pretty early in the third quarter on an offensive foul in which he thought Grayson Allen really sold the play and flopped. And I thought it could have very well just been a no call in general. And from that point on, he did not get a single foul down the stretch. I thought he was so poised with playing in a game that was against a couple of Hall of Famers, a team that has beaten you every time that they played you this season in Phoenix up until that night. And just for him to be able to kind of maintain his head and just kind of go on to the next one, on to the next play, and be a key part of the Warriors down the stretch. Even at the end, he got blocked by Kevin Durant, but the fact he just went up for the rim pretty fearlessly, like, if you're getting blocked by Kevin Durant at the rim, I don't think anyone's going to blame you for that shot selection.
Well, and I'll give you another part of it. He's been feistier. Like, that's the other, like, he's been like mixing it up with guys. Like, he's been, you know, sometimes he'll even get on the ref, like thinking he's fouled, and you know, you want to obviously limit some of that stuff, but I feel like he's been much more just kind of edgy on the court, and I think that's a good thing. I think that's led to more hustle plays, more rebounds, more steals, more, like, he has, like, his defense has been significantly better over the last 2 weeks than it has been at any point, like on ball and off ball. And the off ball defense has been a big struggle for him. The early part of the season, I think it was a major struggle, really up until Draymond came back. I think he massively struggled in terms of team defense. But I don't know. I like the edge. I like the energy. I like the hustle. Like, that's part of the deal for him. He's got to be doing that stuff. That's the value in having a guy like Jonathan Kuminga. It's not, you know, hey, look at this dude, we're going to throw it to him and he's going to go score. It's everything else. He just does so many different things, has the ability to do so many different things that the rest of this Warriors roster, Greg, just doesn't.
Oh, absolutely. Can't. You're right. They, not just that they don't do, that they can't do. And I think he's playing into those strengths tremendously. So it's been really fun to watch his growth, and the feistiness was a good call. I thought double technical right before halftime with RJ Barrett. I saw somebody, I don't remember if it was on Twitter or one of our comments in the chat last night, but someone was like, there was like, any more out of you two and you're grounded, which I thought was kind of a funny comment of the type of discipline. But he was just like, okay. But I mean, what, 1 second left in the half, you don't want to give up an easy shot. RJ Barrett's kind of getting physical. You can do it back to him. Like, I was all good with it.
Yeah, almost. And it's almost every game. I think he's mixing it up with somebody on the opposition. And I don't know. I think that's a good thing. I think that's a really, really, really good thing. It's Just Dubs with JD and Greg Silver here for KNBR, the sports leader. Appreciate everybody watching the program today on YouTube and Twitch and X. Excellent conversation going on through the YouTube chat. You mentioned earlier the Raider Tupac comment. We put it up on the screen. The Celtics' last 3 losses are at home. And I was just kind of looking at it as we kind of look toward the matchup tomorrow. You look at Boston and their last 3 home losses. Now they're playing 28-3 at home. Their 3 home losses are the Lakers, the Clippers, and Denver. So, you look at, I mean, those are all teams that basically have beaten the Warriors in the last month plus at home as well. And so, again, they have been more vulnerable lately at home. They've been unbelievable on the road. But yeah, you can say more vulnerable. I mean, that was February 1st, the last time they lost any game. So yeah, they swept all the way through February after losing on the 1st. But yeah, it should be a fun matchup. Like I said, a lot of eyeballs on this one. And I'm really interested to see how this new look Warriors team, and we'll see. I mean, I would imagine Podziemski probably doesn't play. Wiggins, I don't think has been officially ruled out, but probably isn't going to be playing. Doesn't sound like. So it will be a little.
Clay start tomorrow.
If Podziemski's out, yes. If Podziemski's back, maybe no. And I think if Podziemski's out, it's a no-brainer. Like who else would you even think about starting if Moodys already in for Wiggins?
That's true. Yeah. It's no Wiggins and no Podziemski, then it's going to be the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, do you get? You're not going to start Lester and get cute with it, because then you got Klay Thompson all pissed off that Lester Quinones is starting over him. Like, I think it took you till February to get Klay Thompson to accept coming off the bench for Podziemski or anybody, and now Podziemski goes down. And it's like, oh yeah, we're going to start Lester Quinones over you, Klay, just because we want to keep everything the same. So no, I think it just makes sense. I mean, Klay's played in the big stage in that building, which is a terrific building to see an NBA game in. The finals games there were absolutely electric. I mean, just tremendous, and but also a respectful crowd as well. Like, you could tell as Steph was doing his thing in game 4, like they were like, shit, we are screwed. Like, it's a fan base that I think is seen. I mean, we're not on the air, so I can drop an S-bomb, but it like, you could feel it. Like, they were into it and they supported their team, and bleep you Draymond and all that stuff. But then, like, as Steph was getting going and the Warriors are making their run, they were like, oh man, like, this is like, we're cooked. Like, it's not gonna, like, they're better, and he's a legend and he's doing it here. And it's just like, and they've seen it like over the decades, right? They've seen it, going back to like the Lakers, in the 80s, where sometimes you just lose to superior greatness, and they were appreciative. Like, they really, as much as, like, they a lot of them stuck around and watched the trophy presentation and all of that after game 6. But yeah, no, that's a great crowd in Boston, and they will be lit tomorrow for the Sunday afternoon. Usually the Warriors and Celtics get the Saturday night game. They're getting the Sunday afternoon game this time, as far as ABC goes, and that matchup against Boston, which I'm looking forward to probably as much as any game on the schedule, all season. That's one that I always look at, because they've played so many good games head to head against each other this year.
Yeah, I think the last 2 times they've met, it's been overtime, because was the road game last year the second one also, and that one overtime? But yeah,
I'm trying to think. Yeah, that would have been the first game
and
back.
Then they beat them at home earlier in the season.
Right. Yeah, the Warriors beat them in December. I do remember the Warriors beat them in December at Chase.
Yes.
Beat them in December at Chase, and then I'm looking it up right now just to make sure. Yeah, it was a Thursday in overtime. The Celtics won. It was December or January 19th. So yeah, January. It was a TNT. It was an ABC Saturday night game, and then a TNT Thursday night on January the 19th. And yeah, the Warriors won in San Francisco, as they did earlier this year. And then the Celtics won that game at overtime, 121 to 118. And yeah, the Warriors had a 7-point lead in that game going to the fourth quarter. And funny, the Warriors kind of bogged down in the fourth quarter, only a 17-point fourth quarter for the Warriors. And that one is the game went to overtime. But yeah, real back and forth. The Warriors played a nice game in that building last year to fight and give themselves a chance to win. So yeah, should be a hell of a matchup between the Warriors and the Celtics tomorrow. And we will be on right after, right here, this same space. We'll make sure we tweet out a bunch of different links, even through the Giants coverage that will be over the air tomorrow on KNBR, the sports leader. But we'll make sure we get out on social media, and we'll get out as far as, just the exact timing and all of the different platforms to click and be able to watch us, comment, and really looking forward to it. It's nice for these YouTube shows. It does give us the benefit of really doing more of a 2-man show and allowing Greg to be more of a co-host because of the way everything is structured. So I'm really looking forward to that. tomorrow for again, I think I've said this 5 times since we've started working together, 5 or 6, but the biggest game of the season. Biggest game of the season tomorrow.
It is the biggest game of the season tomorrow. I'm with you. By the way, just looking at the NBA schedule as a whole, like this is a really big weekend for the Western Conference in general. We got Nuggets at Lakers tonight. That's a 5:30 game on ABC. Then tomorrow we have 76ers at Mavericks. Of course, Sixers still without Embiid. And then Clippers at Timberwolves, same time as the Warriors game. And then we also have the Thunder and Suns playing on ESPN at night. So there's going to be some shifting in the standings potentially by the end of the weekend.
Yeah, a lot of potential shifting in the standings when you look at this and the games, like you said, games tomorrow in addition to today. You know, Phoenix playing a couple, like you said. You got the Lakers who are playing Denver. That Dallas game against Philly, how do they fare? Minnesota and the Clippers. I mean, geez, that you're right. I mean, that is a hell of a lineup stacked to be able to see where the Warriors go. We got a couple more comments to get to here in the YouTube chat in our final. We'll probably go another 7 or 8 minutes or so here. Just dubs. With JD and Greg Silver, KNBR, the sports leader. What else we got in the chat, Greg, that strikes your fancy?
Yeah, we've been actually keeping up with it pretty well. We got good discussions going on. Shout out to Erwin joining the party. Says Pajemski currently game time decision. Yeah, I would guess probably a no, but we'll see. We have
the old measuring stick game from Erwin Kwong. The old measuring stick game tomorrow, and then Dat Tyne. There's no measuring stick. LOL. They aren't contending this year. Interesting. They aren't contending this year. Do you think the Warriors are still at a point where they're proving themselves to be contenders? I mean, they are 9th in the West.
Yeah,
no, I mean otherwise.
Like I get what Dat Tind or Dat Tind is saying in that front. Like they have a long way to go if they want to enter the contender conversation, but they're also far from dead. And you still have one of the most feared people leading the charge. So in that sense, like as long as Steph Curry's there, then in my mind you have a shot. Like if Steph Curry gets injured and they get into a playoff series, then hell no. Like, get out of here. They're not contending. If Draymond Green misses time, they're also absolutely not contenders. But outside of that, there's a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think tomorrow's the kind of game that's going to make people think they've got a shot if they can win it. I think that's the reality of the situation. If they don't win it, does it mean they don't have a shot? I don't know. But I do think, to prove that you are a legitimate contender, you do have to at some point. Yeah. You do have to beat. It's not so much the signature wins or anything like that. It's you either have to get some signature wins, but you also have to keep playing to me, it's more about, can this team continue to keep playing at the level that they've played at over the course of the last 6 weeks, basically, where they've been a 14-5, 13-3 over the last month kind of a team. Like if they keep doing that between now and the end of the regular season, then I think they're going to be pushing for the 5 or the 6 seed, which I don't think anybody would have dreamed about at 19-24 would have been a possibility when they dropped that game against the Lakers, 5-6 weeks ago at Chase. So, I think we'll have to see how it all plays out. But I think you said it last night and said it pretty well, which is, they cannot beat the Celtics and even not beat the Bucks. But if they beat Chicago and San Antonio twice and all the teams that they're supposed to beat, quotes, supposed to beat between now and the end of the year, then their record's going to be good enough to where you think that they can maybe make a run regardless. But no, I buy, and I know Erwin, it's, to measure how deep the Warriors can go in the playoffs. I think it's apparent their chances for the championship are pretty slim. But again, I think there's a level of contention. And this is the second part I really agree with from Erwin, measuring the strength of the roster moving into the offseason. Like, I do think how this thing ends really matters as to the direction in which they go next year. We kind of know some of those decisions already. Steve Kerr's back. He's now aligned with Draymond and Steph. I think that leads to a willingness, if Klay Thompson is going to accept a lesser role, for him to potentially be around moving forward. Although I thought it was interesting. What did you think of the reporting that the relationship between Klay Thompson and I think it was Sam Amick, that Klay Thompson and Joe Lacob has been frayed by the original offer and just this whole season, that 2-48 offer and all of that, almost as if there was some mending that still needed to be done on that front, even if Klay was willing to maybe come back and play for Steve and play with Steph and Draymond.
I think that it's not worth totally ignoring, but I also think the last half of that sentence is going to be what matters the most about being with Steve and Steph and Draymond. Like, I do think that will take priority over the relationship with Lacob. Now, obviously, it's easy for me to say that when I'm not handing out the check and giving the money, but I think if Klay wants to stay, I think they will find a way to make it work. But it was an interesting report. I didn't take it lightly, but I also was like, I'm not going to freak out about this right now because it seems like things have changed every 10 days with this team, like almost entirely all the time.
Yeah, no, I think that's right on. Judith, considering the Warriors have one of the easiest remaining schedules, this grind will hopefully get them ready for the playoffs. Yeah, they do have one of the easiest remaining schedules, but again, when you really look at it, the next two aren't easy, and the easy schedule thing, when you play that schedule game, it's contingent on like I'll just look at this next stretch. I mean, the Warriors have worked their ass off to get to 32-27, but they could by Wednesday be 32-29, and then they got to win those next three. And so then you're what, 30? Then you're 35-29, and then you play Dallas and the Lakers. Well, those have been games that the Warriors on the road, they've been winning on the road, but those have been games that they haven't been winning. The Laker games and the Dallas games. So, are they, if they're 30, let's just say they're 35-31 2 weeks from today, right? Well, what does that mean? That means that they're 3-4 in the next 7. And, if they're 35-31, they're probably still 9th or 10th in the West. And so easy schedule, yes, but you're going to have to take advantage of it. Then you get Knicks, Grizzlies, Pacers at home. At some point, this team's going to have to start playing better at home. I think that's another factor. They've been crushing it on the road, but at some point, the Warriors are going to have to play, I think, better basketball on the home floor, and they haven't done it. I mean, they are better on the road at 16-12 than they are at home 16 and 15. With 10 games to go. So, we've talked about the home thing and the fact that, hey, this team really needs to be, I think 9-1 in these last 10 home games, but that's not necessarily going to be a picnic either for this team. Dat chiming in, Dat Tind, Draymond doesn't get suspended, probably a 3 or a 4 seed. It's a damn shame. Maybe. Maybe. I think Draymond definitely would have helped, but that's on Draymond. The CP3 injuries as well, a factor there. So yeah, we'll see how it all shakes out. Erwin, JD's corner shelf fell off the back of the truck is still MIA. I'm telling you, you wouldn't see the corner shelf today with the close-up shot. The close-up shot, but
you're never getting off the hook with this.
The corner shelves are coming. We're gonna have it before the end of the season. And so yeah, I mean, you look at it, And I think, this team's got a nice ceiling. I think, moving forward here, but they are going to need to be tested. They are going to need to be tested. Douglas Mikes chimed in with Otto Porter Jr. Didn't end up getting bought out. Do you think the Warriors just end up giving the 15th spot to one of the two-way contract? I think they're going to roll with 14 at this point. I think they like what they've got. And I think they roll with the 14 plus the two-way guys, unless something happens. You never know. Some kind of injury, then all of a sudden maybe you do have to look to elevate somebody or add somebody to the equation. But I don't think they're going to need an additional player at this point. I know everybody's probably screaming about a big. The Wiggins. The good news is they won't hold home court advantage in the playoffs from Courtney Fox. Yeah. And look, again, I've said this a lot. If and we don't know, Denver could be, Greg, the one or the two, but Minnesota and OKC, depending upon who they face, those two teams are going to really be in for it. Those teams are really going to be in for it as far as a first round series goes.
Congratulations on a great regular season. Your reward is Kevin Durant.
Yeah, your reward is playing the Warriors. Your best season and what would be the Timberwolves' best season in 20 years. They've only been a 1 seed, I think, once ever, and it was in 2004 with Kevin Garnett winning the MVP and all of that. That was his best year with Minnesota, and yeah, here you are. You're facing maybe the Warriors, and then you're facing Denver or the Clippers or Phoenix. To your point. And so I mean, again, I even think the Dallases and the Sacramentos would give. Not saying that they would win, but I do think that the Dallases and Sacramentos would give Minnesota and OKC a hell of a roller coaster ride in a 7-game series, to where there would be points where I think that series would get away from them and they'd have to wrestle it back. None of the top teams would pit 420 are proven besides Denver. Yeah, I think that's more than fair. Wiggins, there was a comment about Wiggins, Rockin' New Era, I think, had the comment about Wiggins. Yeah, hopefully when and if Wiggins comes back, he doesn't need a lot of time to ramp things up. He shouldn't. I thought it was interesting when Steve Kerr was asked about Wiggins and his eventual return. I did think, Greg, it was interesting that he's been in contact with Rick Celebrini, the director of player performance and leader of the training staff. So they need to make sure that he is in condition. Again, he missed 2 months last year, and I do think he got a little tired in the Sac series at times. I thought he got a little tired in the Lakers series at times, but as long as we're talking about a shorter realm of layoff, I think he should be okay. I mean, he's pretty good, I think, at getting himself back into condition. So yeah, really appreciate everybody who's joined us here for the last 2 hours on KNBR on YouTube, streaming on Twitter.
They love our walls. They love our walls.
GA. Well, yeah, no, yes, Greg, chime in. Greg, please do share what is behind you. You have a lot more flair than I do.
This could only be saved for the very end of the show when people want to dip off. I have to represent our Bay Area teams. So we have the town flag, which I know is partially cut off here for the Warriors. And we have the Bay FC. Their inaugural season's happening very soon. And then we have first home game March 30th, and I think first official game on the road is March 16th. So that's coming up.
Ooh,
gotta represent our flagship station for KNBR. The San Francisco Giants is going to be a big focus, and then just a little collection of all my my best family and friends, and then my best friend of all, McLovin. That's right. June 3rd, 1981. McLovin. Happy birthday. All right. Well, that's going to do it. Maybe that's when we save our Dubs OT in-person event. is
our
on
live
McLovin's
event
birthday.
right
Yeah,
before
live event.
right before. Well, it's funny, and again, only like that's in the window between. Actually, June 3rd would be Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals this year. So just saying. And then yeah, it could be the break in between the conference finals and the finals, which begin on June 6th. So yeah, we'll have to see. Although you never know if the Warriors are in. I don't know where the Warriors would be. Warriors are in. I don't know, Denver for Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. Then it may have to be a Red Rocks event. May have to be a Red Rocks event out in Colorado. If it's the Warriors and the Nuggets. Greg, great stuff. Why don't you let everybody know again how the people can consume this and how we're going to keep everybody updated on tomorrow. Look for us right around 3:00 when the Warriors and the Celtics go final from Boston.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is with all of our YouTube stuff or the Apple Podcast or Spotify Podcast, you can subscribe to all of that and get alerted when a new episode drops. We should have this one out in a couple of hours, but many of you have already listened to the whole thing live. And then tomorrow, same deal, YouTube, right after Warriors Celtics. I'll be at the studio in KNBR. JD will be all cooped up at home, and we'll have a good little post-game show for sure. I will have to really
different
push
background
back
tomorrow
on the Giants stuff. Yeah, new background. Because I will be doing some Giants spring training post game, but promise to everybody it's not going to compromise our Warriors post game whatsoever. So we got a big game.
Yep, looking forward to it. For Greg, I'm JD. Thanks for everybody who's watched here for the last 2+ hours. We're back tomorrow for Dubs OT following the Warriors and the Celtics. Check us out, KNBR, the